Before we start this video, a large thank you to Blue and Elaine, Man Like Moody, Thursday 88, a name I unfortunately cannot pronounce. Thank you very much for the support, my friend. Connor, Lesneef, Freeze, Gabriel, Papa Schlumpf, and Charlie for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And a special thank you to Halo Burner and Mr. Fox Gaming for their immense support to the channel this month on Patreon. It is greatly appreciated, gentlemen, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hello my friends, and what is on the agenda for today? Well, we're going to open up any character prefab. We're going to basically add a floating HP bar so we can see the damage we've done. And the idea here is we're just going to make a slider like before. We're going to add a few more things to it, so it's going to behave a little bit differently than your standard HP bar we have on our player's UI. So let's create a canvas first under here. This is under any character prefab. We're going to make this into a prefab too later. And I'm just going to rename it to character UI. You don't really need to do this, but I'm going to call it character UI. You can keep it called canvas if you want. We're going to change it from screen space overlay to world space. And what this means is that it will actually be visible in the world, and it's not just going to hang on top of your screen. So yeah, we're going to set it to world space, and you can see it's pretty massive. This giant box here is the canvas. So we're going to greatly scale it down just to an area slightly bigger or wider than the character, just over their head. So I'm going to change the width to something like 65 by 5, and then I'm also going to change the scale to 1/10 and reset the position, and I'm also going to take a sip of coffee real quick. Okay, so that's all good to go, and what you want to do now, like I said, is just downscale it, because it's still quite large, and if you don't want to downscale it, you can just make the width and height super small, whatever gets you the result of having it just a little larger than the player, a little bit wider. And that's good to go. So this is only going to house the HP bar. If you want to add other things to it, that's cool too. Maybe you want to make your character's stamina visible for guard breaking or their poise, whatever you want, you can do that. This is where you'd ideally make those bars. So create a slider. And again, I'm going to make the scale 1/10 just so it's a lot smaller. I'm going to change the width and height a little bit. And if you feel like you want to modify the width and the height instead of the scale, that's cool too. Whatever way is more consistent and seems to be right for your project, go ahead and do that. I'm going to hide the handle because I don't need to use a handle object. I'm going to keep this UI bar the same, just to not, I've already gone over a few changes I made on the UI for the player bar, so I won't spend too much time in this. We're just going to make the fill a red, whatever color you want, and then the fill background just a black. So there we go. That's good. And yeah, go to the slider and just make sure it works. I don't like how it doesn't totally fill right up to the edge there, so I'm just going to change the fill area's width so it actually goes over the whole bar like so, and I'm content with that. So you can change whatever you want. I encourage you to add your own graphics or textures to this, really make it your own. I'm going to keep it pretty bare bones. Make sure you untick raycast target on all these images, by the way, just to save on CPU, because it doesn't need to be a raycast target. It's not being adjusted. It's only being adjusted by a script. So then you can go to add a component here, and we can just go to UI. We're going to make a new script. We're going to call it character HP bar. So this is going to be used for the player too, but you don't want this to pop up over your head on your screen locally, and we'll get to that too, but you want to see other players' HP bar when their HP changes. So we're going to cover all that. Also, you don't want it to pop up for bosses. We'll cover that as well. So namespace, SG, delete the start and update functionality as is per tradition. I'm going to make my first variable here a private character manager variable. I'm going to call it character. And I'm going to make a serializable field here for bool. And we're going to make this called display name on character. Or you can call it display name on damage, actually. So we'll be very clear. Display character name on damage. We're going to defaultly set that to false. What will this do? It's just going to make the character's name pop up. So this is useful for players. So you can, if you're fighting somebody, you can see their name. And if you want to have like, fake invaders and have their name pop up too. Or if you just want to have the name up for any character in your game. So we're going to make a float default time before bar hides. Initialize that to 3. This is the time before the bar will disable. If you haven't taken damage in 3 seconds, it will just hide. And we're going to have a timer for that. And obviously the timer is going to be defaultly at 0. I'll just call it hide timer. Whatever you want to call it, as long as you understand that it's clear. Basically, this timer is going to count down every time it resets. And when it gets to 0, it's going to hide this game object. So next is the current damage taken, and that's going to be defaultly at 0. I'll get to why that's important. Basically, if you take more than one damage step before the bar hides, it will just add them together. Let's say using TM Pro up here now, so we can use Text Mesh Pro to put in 2 Text Mesh Pro UGUI components, try saying that 10 times fast, for character name and the character damage. So again, we're going to update the name depending on the character's name if it is visible, and the damage depending on the damage you've taken before the bar has hidden. All right, cool. We can make this derived from UI stat bar because it's literally going to share identical logic, except it's going to do a few extra things. Apologies if you hear noise in the background. There are some sirens going up the street there. So I'm just making a comment here saying performs identically to the UI stat bar. And then we're going to say that it, except this bar, appears and disappears. And we can say that it always faces the camera. So we can say it appears and disappears in world space, and it always faces the camera. So how are we going to achieve that? Well, it's pretty simple. We're just going to use an update function, and we're going to make the transform face the main camera in the scene. There's only ever one main camera in the scene, but we'll get that in a second. Let's first override awake, and we're going to say character is equal to get component in parent, because this is a child of the main character manager object, and then we just say character manager. So we don't have a start, so I think I'm going to make one and then override it just in case you want to add any logic on the base class. So we try to override start. Yeah, that doesn't exist. Let's jump to UI stat bar real quick, and then make a start we can override. So we're going to say protected virtual void start, and nothing's going to go in this here, unless you want to specifically add some logic here right now. But for me, right now, nothing. We'll keep it empty. And we're going to override it, and we will call the base.start in case in the future we want to affect basically every version of the script with some logic. So we're going to say GameObject.setActive false. So we're going to disable this immediately after we've gotten our references here, so the character manager. Now let's make a override void called setStat, and we're just going to not use anything from the base logic, but we're still going to use this function as it normally will be called. So we're going to say if we are displaying the character's name on damage, we want to basically say character name.enabled is equal to true, and this is the text component, so you want to defaultly disable that if you don't want the name to be displayed. And then we're going to say character name.text is equal to character. And now we have a problem here, see, because we have a character name network variable for players because it changes. And here on the AI character manager, we have a character name variable that's static. It doesn't need to be network variable because it never changes. So this isn't really as much as a problem as we have to do some additional logic here. And you could just make it a network variable for the AI character manager, but we don't need to, so I'm not going to. Let's make a private AI character manager variable, and we'll do a cast. And this is quite simple. We're going to say on awake, if the character variable does not equal null, then we're going to say AI character equals character as AI character manager. And if that's null, no big deal. Nothing will happen. Nothing will come of it. So basically, if this HV bar is on an AI character, we'll know. We'll get it here through a cast. And then down here, we can simply say, if AI character does not equal null, then we're going to reference the AI character's name by grabbing it from the AI character manager.character name. Just that simple. No need to overcomplicate it. Now, since the player does have their name stored on a network variable, we need to reference that as well, and we can just do the exact same thing and do a cast. Very inexpensive, so it's just very simple to do it that way. Just checking one time on awake, and then every time we're updating it, we're checking to see if it's not null. So we can just go up here now and say, we can make a player manager variable, and we can just call that player character. So private player manager, player character. And then just like we did with the AI character here, on awake, we can say if character does not equal null. And if you want to, you can just open up some curly braces here and do both inside the same place. We're going to say player character is equal to character as player manager. And if it is not a player manager, it will just return a null and nothing will come of it, so we're fine. We come in here and say if the player character does not equal null, this time we're going to reference our player's network manager instead. And you want to reference the character name .value.toString. It's a bit weird, I know, because we're getting the value of the character name here on the network manager. And then since it's not quite a regular string, we have to put it to string by saying .toString. There we go. And now it will display as normal. So I'm going to save that now. What you want to do right below here, we're going to make a, let's actually make a reference to our slider, and it's private, so go back to the base class and make it protected. I'm also just going to make the rect transform protected too. We don't need to right now, but just in case in the future, if you ever want to do anything with it, it's pretty standard that everything that inherits from this class can have access to these variables if it needs. So let's go back here now and say slider.maxValue is equal to, and let's reference the character.character network manager .maxHP. Now, why are we referencing this here? Well, if you have some kind of character effect or some buff that changes your max HP, you want to make sure it's updated here too when you're setting the stat. So I'm just going to call this here in case max health is changed through an effect. I'm noting this because in Nephilim, when I was changing stuff with character effects, I placed this here with a remark and a comment. You probably won't have this this problem if you're not modifying your AI with any character effects, but just in case you are, I'm going to put that right there. So next, let's make a to-do. There's a yellow bar that appears behind your HP bar in Dark Souls and Elden Ring when you get damaged. I call it the secondary bar. So I'm just going to say to-do, run secondary bar logic. When we actually get around to making that, that's a polish element though, so let's get some more core features out of the way. We'll return that in the future. Then we're going to say current damage taken is equal to mathf.round to int. And what you want to do is pass here the current damage taken plus, and then it's going to be in brackets the old HP minus the new HP. So we don't have a variable for that yet, but we'll come back to that. So you could change this to new HP if you want instead of new value or new stat, whatever's more clear to you. I'm just going to keep it at the new value, but basically that's going to be your new HP. So float, you could say old damage here, and you could do it that way. You can calculate your old HP before this happens, but we're going to come back to that. Don't worry about that right now, because we're going to set this up to basically trigger with an on HP changed event. But we'll get back to that. So ignore these two lines of code, and now we're going to revisit this in a sec. So basically what you want to do, I'll just make a comment here, is the total damage taken whilst the bar is active. This is going to basically tell you how much damage you've taken while the bar has been up and not hidden, and then show that. So we're going to say if the current damage taken is less than 0, else if it's greater than 0, what do we want to do? Well, if your current damage taken is less than 0, it means you've had some HP added. So we're going to say current damage taken is equal to mathf.abs, and we're going to pass the current damage taken. Absolute value just basically makes it an absolute number, removes the negative or the sign. So it wouldn't be a negative value. It wouldn't say minus 50. It would just say 50. Then we're going to say character damage.text is equal to plus, and we pass the current damage taken to string. Likewise, else we just say minus. So you'll be able to see basically if you've had HP added on from some maybe a miracle or a spell. Otherwise, it will just show the minus, and will show the damage that you've received. So we can say slider.value is equal to new value, and that's pretty much it. Oh, right. Now we have to say if the character .character network manager .current health .value does not equal the max health value, we want to enable this HP bar. So if your HP doesn't equal full, enable the HP bar, and we also want to set the timer so it will go away after so many seconds. So we're going to say timer, which I've called hide timer, is equal to default time before the bar hides. And keep in mind, this will reset it to the default time every time the character is hit or damaged or their HP changes. And we want to say GameObject.setActive is equal to true. And now we run our update logic. So let's make a private update function here. And we want to do two things. We want to count down the timer and make sure the HP bar is always facing the camera. So let's actually make an onDisable as well. And onDisable, we want to say current damage taken is equal to 0, just so we reset that every time that the bar is hidden. And you can see this is basically called when the game object is deactivated. So every time it's deactivated, we're going to reset the current damage taken variable. Now in update, we're going to say transform.lookAt is equal, or we're going to pass transform.position plus camera.main.transform.forward. And this will basically just get this object to always look at the camera. And then we're going to say if the timer is greater than 0, we just want to say hide timer minus equals time.delta time, and all this will do is make the timer count down every second. And otherwise, if the timer is not above 0, we want to deactivate this game object by saying GameObject.setActive false, and that will trigger onDisable. All right, cool. So that's mostly done. Now let's go and start plugging some stuff in. Let's jump back over now to, I'm just going to minimize everything here so it's a bit clean. So let's go over it before we leave. You can see here if display character's name on damage. So all that means is if we have this ticked, then we're going to show the character name. We're going to set the character name in here using a Text Mesh Pro object. So let's create those Text Mesh Pro objects real fast. Let's create one for the character name and one for the character damage. I'm going to take some time here and size it up how I see fit. I'm going to set an auto size component, or I'm going to check the auto size bool here so it does actually fit the text to the size of the box. I'm going to set my min and maximum values, and again, just play around with this and get it looking how you like. No need to rush this. I do encourage you to try out some different font styles and stuff. It really does make a world of a difference for setting the vibe to your game. I think I've tried like a dozen different fonts for Nephilim before I landed on one, and it really does help, convey the vibe, whatever you're going for. Make sure it matches the setting of your game. I'm going to make the width the same as the HP bar because I want it to line up with the left edge here of the HP bar, like so. That's important. I'm also going to anchor it to the top of the HP bar so that if anything ever changes, the character's name is anchored there. And I'm going to call this character name. I'm going to duplicate this and call this character damage. And basically, I'm just going to keep it identical, but I'm going to put it below the HP bar and anchor it below there too. Now, depending on how tall your character is, you're going to want to basically move the character UI up or down. So obviously for a taller character, this would probably be more inside of them. But right now it's floating over this character's head. So what I'm trying to say is if you got Dirk and you drop in the character UI because you want it there, then you're going to want to adjust the character's Y position here for the character UI. You can see right now it's 2. 2.5 is a bit too high. 2.1 looks pretty great to me. And this will differ too depending on the size of your HP bar, so keep all of that in mind. Now, I'm going to save the character HP bar. First, I'm going to drag in these references before I do that as a prefab. And then I'm going to save the character UI as a prefab as well. So let's jump back in here to our logic. You can see here, again, we're setting the slider to max value, so if the HP changes, we're good to go. And then we're getting the current damage taken, and we're just passing that to the current damage taken text object here. And if it's positive, we're going to show that you gain HP with a positive. If you lost HP, it's going to be negative. And then we're going to make sure the bar is enabled if your HP changes. And the timer starts. When the timer hits 0, it's going to deactivate the object again, so it's hidden. So pretty straightforward. Let's save that. I'm trying to go through this as not too fast, not too slow, because we only have so much time to explain things before the video drags on a bit too long. So if I am moving a bit too fast, please let me know in the comments. So let's create a character folder in the prefabs UI folder, and then let's drag in our HP bar and then our UI afterwards. So there we go. Now, if you want to, you can make a different character UI for each character, or you can just use this prefab. I'm going to use the prefab because then if I make adjustments in one, it makes adjustments for all. So let's jump over to the AI character manager script now. And now, basically, you can see here we're checking HP, but what we want to do is use onEnable. And why are we doing this? Because we don't want to keep updating this when the object is disabled, especially if you got like 100 characters in a scene and some of them are active and some aren't. So let's go to the base class character manager and let's make a virtual onEnable and a virtual onDisable. And we're not going to populate any logic in it right now. So protected virtual void onEnable and onDisable. And then on our AI character manager, we're going to override these. And I'm going to use base.onEnable and base.onDisable in case we add any logic there in the future. Okay, that's good. So what are we doing here? Well, we're going to say character network manager dot current health dot onValue change plus equals. Now there's a couple of things we can do here. I'll go through 2 with you, and I'll show you my preferred method as usual. So you could go to the character manager and you could just drop in a reference to your HP bar. So you can make a header UI and then make a public. It needs to be public because it needs to be referenced with this method. Or I guess it could be protected, sorry, because you're referencing it through a base class. Character HP bar. And then you would drag that in here, and you could take this now and reference in here. But you can't add it to a plus or equals here because you need an old value and new value. So if we tried to use set max stat, it won't work because it just has one value. So what you could do is make a function that basically requires both, pass it to that, and have that function call set stat. You could do that. You could also put it on the HP bar if you want to. Because like I said, these 2 values, right? It needs the old value and the new value because it's requiring that from onValue change. But what we're going to do instead, you can see here this is 1 value. So you could, like I said, make the function under. What we're going to do instead, though, is we're going to make a character UI manager. And this isn't the same as a player UI manager because this exists for every character object in the scene. Why am I doing this? Well, if you want to add other bars, you can also reference them through this. But also, if you want to add any UI-specific settings, you could reference them through this too. And this is a class that will universally be shared across all characters. You can make versions for the player and the AI if you want, but I've never had to need to do that just yet. So I'm just going to make it a general character UI manager. Again, you want to call this in your character manager, hide an inspector, public character UI manager. Called on awake is equal to get component in children. Or sorry, get component because it's on the same component as the character manager. And from there, we can kind of control all and any UI elements that will pop up on the character and world space. So right now, we just have the character HP bar. So let's make a public void, and we're going to call this on HP changed. And we're going to make it require you guessed it, an old value and a new value. So int old value and int new value. And all we do now is instead of calling directly from the HP bar, we just call this, and then we call the HP bar here, like so, and we set the stat with new value. Now we're not done yet because we're going to simplify it a little bit more as well. So let's come back over here now and let's actually call that on enable. So we could say character UI manager, and we're going to say dot on HP change. So remember before how I said we needed the old HP value to calculate the amount of damage we've taken in a more elegant way? We're going to use that right now as well. Whoops, that's not supposed to be. I'm not supposed to pass the values. That's just supposed to be like so. So now if we jump over and save that first, and let's go and come down here to on disable, which I haven't overridden yet, we want to unsubscribe in this event. So basically the bar is not being affected, not popping up, not running if the object is disabled. Let's save that. And now let's go over to the character manager and let's make the character UI manager, sorry. Let's make a public bool for has floating HP bar. So why am I doing this? I'm going to initialize it true by default because you don't want these for boss characters. Because if you had a floating HP bar for your boss, it would be weird if you saw a boss HP bar at the bottom of your screen and if you enter the arena. And maybe you don't want them for certain characters. I don't know. This just makes it easier to set it up if you want it for some and not for others. And now for on enable, we're going to check if the character does have a floating HP bar. We're going to subscribe to this event when the HP changes. And on disable, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to unsubscribe. So let's drag in the character HP bar now under your prefabs. And if you want, you could get that on awake using some logic of the code. I'm just going to drag it in the prefab here. And I'm going to untick on Dirk has floating HP bar, but I'm also going to drag this in just in case you want to, I don't know, have Dirk spawn as some normal character through some means. And I'm also going to change the UI here so it's over Dirk's head. And again, I'm probably never going to use this for Dirk, but I'm still going to set it up just in case. It's never good to have broken references here, so I'm just going to set this up like so. And then lastly, we can do it for our player as well. And the player is going to have a little bit different logic. So let's drag in the character UI, and that's good. Let's also add a character UI manager's component to the player, and let's drag that in right here like so. Now you can untick has floating UI bar if you want, but since the player is its own object, we're going to handle it a little bit differently. The player always has a floating HP bar no matter what, unless it's your player, because you don't want to see a floating HP bar above your own head. That'd be kind of weird. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to do the same thing we did with our AI, but we're going to basically check if we're the owner. Let me check my notes here. Yes, so we're going to simply check if we are the owner, and we're going to say if we are the owner, subscribe to this event on enable, otherwise unsubscribe to this event on disable if we are not the owner, sorry. So you only want to see this HP bar if this game object in your scene is not yours. So basically, if I'm in your scene, you want to see the HP bar pop up over my character's head, but not your own. Okay, let's save that, and we're going to test it out too. So I'm just going to make a comment here. Only update floating HP bar if this character is not your player character. Or I could say not the local player's character is probably more descriptive. So I'm going to make a comment here too. You don't want to see a floating HP bar above your own head. All right, that's pretty clear. So I am going to save this now, and we can momentarily drop into the project and see if this is working. Whoops, I forgot one thing though. Back in the character UI HP bar, that should be minus, not equals. And also, we want to pass the old HP, not the old damage. My bad. Let's do that right now. So let's make a variable for old stat here and make it a public variable. This is pretty crucial, otherwise you're going to get some incorrect math. So public int old health value is equal to 0. And we can pass this using our function that we created on the character UI manager. So now on HP change, but before we update the character bar, we say character HP bar dot old health value is equal to old value. And then under set stat, we say old value minus new value here. And that will get us the correct math for adding up the damage we've taken before the bar hides. Okay, so now we can save that, and now let's jump into the game and try it. So I have a zombie here. I'm going to hit him, and you can see, yep, 130, and then boom, 272. That adds up correctly. So that's my first hit plus my second hit. Now, if I have a second character here, you can see, yes, the HP bar does update for me after he hits him too. That's cool. Now, I'm going to basically aggro this zombie, make sure it updates for the player. So I'm going to let the zombie hit him, and yes, it does. Now, let's make sure the character HP bar is not spawning above our own heads. I'm just going to basically walk my character over here and try to get the zombie to hit two of us at one time. So we don't want the UI bar to appear over my head, but over that character's head. And it does appear over my head, so we have a problem. And as I'm saying this out loud, I see what the problem is. I should not be calling this on enable because this is basically getting called before on network spawn is getting called, so we don't know if we're the owner of this object yet or not. So what we want to do, a simple fix, and I can see here I've misread my notes as I was writing this. This is supposed to go to on network spawn right outside of if is owner, so right below here like so. That's it. And then this one as well is supposed to go on network despawn outside the if is owner box. There we go. Now it should work. So I'm just going to jump back into the game. I'm going to save this and we're going to try this. Now I'm in single player and yes. Okay, so the HP bar is not popping up above our heads. That is working as intended. Wonderful. So I got some questions from people asking why their network variables changed in the inspector but didn't update in the game. If we try to go to a network variable here and change it, you can see I've got a warning. Network variable is written but doesn't know it's a network behavior yet. Are you modifying network variable before the network object is spawned? This is a pretty counterintuitive function of Unity, and I'm assuming there's a reason they did it, but if you try to change the network variable in the inspector, it just doesn't work. So if you change it in the inspector though, and then you try to change it in the script, it doesn't update because it uses a serialized version of the network variable in the inspector. So what you want to do is change it in the script and then remove the component. So I'll show you. I'll go to character network manager and change the health value. You can see it's 000 right now. So I'll change it to 400, 400 right here. So max and current health is 400. If I go back into Unity, you can see here that the value is definitely still 0 on my prefab, but if I remove the component and then re-add it, it's 400. Now that's kind of very annoying to do. So what you want to do is basically always set these variables after or during on network spawn. So when you're doing your calculations for setting your health, you want to always set those up during that process. And if you have a default value you want to assign it in the code first, and then when you add the component, it will be as such. But this will almost never be a problem because you're going to change or set these values when you spawn the object anyway, in most use cases, if not all. So I'm not entirely sure why you can't change these with serialized variables in the inspector. I'm sure Unity has a reason to do it. It does seem a little bit counterintuitive, but nonetheless, that is how it works for now. So I know a few people were confused as to why that was happening, why they changed their variables in the inspector, but they joined the game and see it was reset. That is why. Thank you very much for joining me again this weekend, guys. I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I also hope you all have a lovely weekend. A special thank you to my patrons for their continued support, and it's because of all you lovely individuals I get to keep doing this. Thank you to all of you who take the time to like and comment on the video. It is also greatly appreciated. I will see you guys next week.